Alrighty, there we go. I came on just quickly on the wrong link. I hope you didn't see that. Sorry about that. Happy Monday morning, everybody. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It is great to see you this Monday morning. Um, Tailspin. Honestly, what is going on with this being November and not even the beginning of November to boot? Holy mackerel. Well, we had a great show on Friday night. It was one of my favorite shows for a while because we were talking about some of the new acquisitions at the Folk Art Museum in New York City, and we were looking at some of the mostly quilts. We looked at that one rug that was, remember the snowshoes that was from the said the 1970s, and I had questions about that because it looked like such an old rug. But it turned out the artist is, it's almost guaranteed that they know who the person was who made it, and it would place it in that timeline. So that was all interesting. And while we were running the Friday show, there was a lot of interaction, and people were looking stuff up, and we were answering questions and asking questions like this. It was very exciting on Friday. So we got through a lot of content, but there was still a lot left over, and that's what I want to do today, because even though my new Atha magazine has come, and I want to look at that together with you, I do want to conclude this conversation about the Folk Art Museum because we were about to on Friday night, had we not run out of time and had it was such a full episode, just the way it was. I didn't want to bring in the last pieces that were needle arts pieces. And yes, quilting is a needle art as well. But quilting is such a big category. And then sort of embroidery, samplers, crewel work, that's in my mind its own category because it's also a large, collectively it's a large category. So that's what I want to do today. But first I want to say hello. Ruth, it is good to see you. Karen, it's good to see you. Happy Monday morning from sunny, brisk Black Forest, Colorado. Cheryl, great to see you on the Cape. Good morning to you too. Coffee in hand, beautifully sunny. Break from cleaning house. That sounds great. Well-deserved break, no doubt. You hard worker. Lisa, great to see you in Jerusalem, Ohio. Great to see you and welcome. Carol P., good morning from sunny in 38, Wisconsin. It's a little cooler over there, but it does sound, the sunny part sounds right, right? It can be cold as anything. It's been like maybe on average 42, 44 here. But it's been sunny, so it still feels like a greenhouse when you're driving around in the car. It still doesn't feel like winter to me. I guess we are creeping there slowly, but it is nice to hear all these temperatures across the country because it makes me think there's hopes that we might have a winter in the end. Ryan, great to see you. Happy rainy Monday in Texas. No work today. All right, you are finishing your vintage latch hook. I can't wait to see that. Are you going to send that in for the next gallery night? I'm really curious. I really want to check that out. Peace and love to you too. I do want to check out your latch hook. You know, I taught this weekend. Yeah, I taught once this weekend on Saturday in Madison at the Madison Wool. What a nice group of people gather around there. And there's always new people. There's always new friends, which is exciting because this is local. Like I teach in person. It's local people. It's half an hour away from the house. And we always get into such great conversations in these live classes because, it's 3 hours. We're paced pretty well. And there are gaps when I'm kind of waiting and watching people's progress to see mostly how technical the person is who's hooking, because then I know to kind of curve like my input a little bit to be a bit more technical and also more accepting of the fact that a very technical person will keep pulling their stuff out until it's absolutely perfect kind of thing. And then I'm keeping half an eye on the students who are wild and crazy and going really fast, because I think that kind of energy is probably something that they need this craft for. Like I'm a very high energy person and I move very fast. This craft is great for that because it slows me down to this measured pace. And while my thoughts are still chaotic and frantic, my body moves slow, and it keeps things kind of regulated. So it's always fun to teach these live classes. I need to do it more often for sure. But I traveled so much in such a short time that I was like, nope, not signing up for anything. But I think I will think about it again because it is such a pleasure to meet new people and to be out there in person and to chat and to just be reminded. I feel like if you're going to talk about, if I'm going to talk about rug hooking and from the point of view of a teacher, I feel like I have to teach often in person because you do forget those tiny little nuances of things that people do or people wonder about or things that can trip you up way at the beginning of learning. I forget about that stuff unless I'm constantly reminded, and it is important to be reminded. Otherwise, you're not giving the best information to absolute beginners. It's important to remember all those little things. Ruth says there was a big spread in ARIA about our rug hooking guilds in Ozark Mountain Rug Hookers Guild Americana meeting. Oh, interesting. In Atha, there was a big spread. I haven't even taken it out of the plastic yet. So that's great to know. Ruth, I will certainly feature that. Without a doubt, I'm going to feature that. Dave, great to see you. It's sunny. It's 50 degrees in Toronto. That sounds great. You've got coffee. I've got water with that squirt stuff in it. They sell like different flavors. I don't get the one that says vitamin because I'm wondering if it's also loaded with caffeine. And I also wonder if you drink water that has the squirt stuff in it, like from Stop and Shop, do you still get the benefit of it just being water? You know how they say like you need to drink like, I don't know, 3 troughs of water a day to be healthy? Does it count if you put the squirt stuff in it still, I wonder, or are you like somehow tainting it? I don't know how these things work. I'm just trying to drink more water, but it's nice when it's flavored by something, other than with chlorine or something like that or fluoride. Ruth says, yeah, no, I knew you did, Ruth. I figured it out. Diane, it's great to see you in Fort Worth, Texas. Great to see you. Welcome back. Monday, everybody. So let's think about what needs doing. Now, a couple of things I want to tell you about before we get started with content. If you noticed a couple of days ago, I put up classes for the first time. I've been thinking about whether it makes sense for ribbon candy hooking to offer classes by other people. And I've been weighing out the pros and cons, and they are mostly boring business pros and cons about percentages, fees, income tax, and extra work sorting those kinds of things out. But at the end of the day, I decided to move forward with my good buddy Rebecca White Martin of Storyteller Wool, to test out in practice the idea of her running classes through ribbon candy hooking and through the ribbon candy hooking Zoom and all of that stuff. So without me actually being present. So we set that up over the weekend, and she put 2 classes up, and she put a minimum of 5 for both classes. One of the classes got like 7 or 10 immediately. So that one, I think that's the one with the standing wool, like the standing wool techniques, the jar one. That one will close at 15, just so you all know, number one, that it's there. It's an online Zoom class, and she is it's an hour-and-a-half class. She is demonstrating live, answering questions and showing with her hands. It's not a kitted class. It's not a class where you have to order a kit, hope the kit arrives in time and all of that stuff. No, it's a class where you're watching, listening. She's showing you close up all of these different techniques, and then you can do it. And the class is recorded, right? So it's only recorded, and it's only there for people who have bought the class. So once you buy the class happens, it's recorded live. You ask questions that you want. You're maybe not able to tune in at that time. The class is recorded, and it's sent to everybody who bought that class. And you can watch it every afternoon if you want, just to be sure that you know all of the techniques that she's showing in that class. The second class is using scraps to make ornaments. And again, it's another techniques class. It's a little bit different, but more techniques, different techniques. So both of those classes are up. Both of those have people signed up. And at least one, I haven't checked the numbers like in the last 12 hours, but at least one of them is looking at closing fairly soon because of volume. So be thinking about that if you want to learn techniques from Rebecca. She's a very technical person, and she knows all of the tricks for doing different both punching and hooking techniques, right? She is certified both McGowan and Oxford. She knows all of those little tricks and stitches and things like that. She's an encyclopedia of that stuff. So these are bound to be exciting classes. Those are there at Ribbon Candy Hooking. I had a class coming up that I have neglected to mention all along. It is the latest design like. It's designed like the 20th century photographer, which is meant to take us from 1900 and still the very sort of advent of photography to much more contemporary photographers like Ansel Adams and people whose names you know for sure. Um, I have not been advertising that, and I completely forgot that it was on the calendar. So I will still run that class, but I'm bumping the start day to be this coming Thursday to being, I'm sorry, Wednesday. This coming Wednesday to being next Wednesday. So it'll be this coming Sunday and Wednesday. If you look at Ribbon Candy Hooking for Design Like, it's the most recent one. I need a little more time to walk into that and to get the perfect program together that that will make a connection, right? Make the transition between what is the relationship between photography, composition and photography, and composition and rug hooking, and how can we use the best of photographic famous images as well as not unknown photographers who did innovative work. How can we sort of use their work and their talent over the decades to create rug designs that would be successful in a different medium? So that's the conversation, but also looking at sort of nutshell of the history of photography and some of the great names of photography. Lots of inspiration built into this class. So that is there too. Be looking out for that. Um, and yeah, I think a bunch of you wrote me after Friday. I think we will, for the next issue of Magpie, go for the theme of busy bees. So the theme is bees, like honeybees. What are they called? What are their hives called? Apiary, something like that. Um, and I'm still figuring out how to sideways branch, so it's a little bit broader. But I was thinking maybe bees, even insects, right? Because we will soon be featuring, I will be showing the insect book by Yvonne Eiten Scott and Leslie. God, why is her last name not with me? Because I love her and she's a sweetheart. The two authors of the insect book and exhibit, they're both in Iceland right now. But as soon as they're back, we're going to figure out how to get that book for sale anywhere for you. So once I run the show and review the book on hooking insects, which is so gorgeous, you will actually be able to get the book because it is not available at this moment. But she has tons of them. So we're figuring that out. Maybe it is a good time to talk about insects in general. Special emphasis on our buddy, the bee. So that's coming up for you too. Pollinators in general would widen the theme. That's true, Judy, because like butterflies are pollinators too. It's not a catchy name. Like this is the pollinators issue. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to, maybe I'll stick with busy bee and we'll say like the busy bee and other um, pollinating insects. That's not catchy either, is it? I like the idea. It is the idea. That is what we're doing. But we'll think of a catchier way to say it. So it sounds a bit more charming, you know. I love this idea for spring though. So let's get going with that and be thinking about that because the deadline for the next Magpie will be February 1st, 2025. And the other product I want to tell you about that I will start to advertise really soon is the special product that Ribbon Candy is putting out this holiday season, and it is the rug hooking murder mystery puzzle. And that is being printed right now. I'm printing like the sample puzzle so I can look at the quality and just be sure the color and everything is good on it. And then I will make it available through the studio printer, right? It's like a studio printer that's printing the puzzle. I'm not manufacturing it. And I'm not going to be the middleman on this because if I am, I would have to charge you a fortune for it because it would be shipping twice. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have it shipped directly to you with links from the company who's manufacturing it. But it is a short story that we will read together on a live show. It is a mystery story that I wrote that takes place at a rug hooking guild, their Christmas show where they get together for their party and they put all their rugs up for their Christmas show, and someone is murdered at the rug hooking show. And you will recognize it is not based on anybody, I promise. It not based on a true story at all, but you will recognize lots of types of characters and situations in the cast of suspects in this story. You might recognize some people like this from your life, your guild, whatever. Not making fun of anyone. It's just class. It's just for rug hookers, punchers, rug makers. It's just for rug makers. It wouldn't be appealing to other people because it's really specific, but it is a lot of fun. And the idea is, I think it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, which sounds like a lot, but it's the 500 ones go by so fast, you know. I'll be reading the thing with you, the story, and then if you buy the product, I will send you separately, like a triangle, right? They send you the puzzle in the box that does not have the picture on it, because that's the whole point of the mystery. And I will be reading the thing on a coffee time, the short story, and we'll be talking about it, but obviously not giving the solution. And you won't be able to figure out the solution without looking at the image on the puzzle. So that should be a lot of fun for us. And I will be sending you, if you get the puzzle, the text for the story too, in case you want to look at it again in person, and the hooked cameos, images of the whole cast of characters. So you know what each character looks like. And my buddy Mandy Cornish has hooked the most extraordinary scene that I cannot describe, that is the solution, that is the puzzle. It's extraordinary, and it was very large. And she is currently hooking cameos of the 9 suspects who are involved in the story. So it's a fun thing to do around the holidays. It's very rug hooking, relatable. And if you feel like sitting in the quiet, listening to holiday music and watching movies, what a great thing to work on a rug hooking puzzle. The first one of its kind this holiday season. So there's more coming on that soon. Couple of fun products that are coming up. Linda B, great to see you. Goretti, great to see you. And yes, I do love the pollinators. Let's keep chipping away on the right words. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for all of this stuff. I will be also putting out some rose patterns for the rose book that I've already started working on. I'm shaping my thoughts on that subject and figuring out for sure which ones I want to do, how many I want in the book, because I don't want it to be a giant bumper book again of 198 pages. That I can't do that again so soon. So it'll be a little bit of a smaller book, probably maybe 140 or 50 pages. So I'm figuring that out, and I'll keep you updated. Patreon members first always get first whack at the patterns and things like that. As a huge thank you for supporting the brand, and Patreon members, I owe you a message. The puzzle is going to be a lot of fun, Karen. This is one of the behind-the-scenes things I've been working on all year, the story, and it's fun, and it's funny, and it's not super graphic. It's a little graphic. It's not super graphic, but it is fun, and it will take you hours to do the puzzle. And it is super festive because the scene of the puzzle is festive, right? It is a solution, and it's very busy, but it is festive, and will put you in that good sort of holiday spirit. So it will be a fun product. And if it goes well, and if it sells well, Barbara, good to see you. We'll think about doing that more often in different seasons, because it was a lot of fun. And if I have the prototype for it, we can do it more often if it's something that you enjoy. I'm coming back over here because I'm starting looking at our first piece that was, I don't want to say left over from Friday night. It was not left over, but I skipped over it because it was kind of a different genre. And we were so hot and heavy talking about the country fair ribbon quilts and the cookie cutter quilt, remember? That, you know, when I saw this one in my slideshow, this is called I refer to this as the Lavinia Castle. That is the maker of this piece. Lavinia Castle, it's a needlework, needlework, not a needle point, but a needlework. And Lavinia's life was between 1826 and 1909. This piece was made in 1841. It is dated, so that's easy to know. In Pennsylvania. The medium is silk thread, and it has paper padding on linen. Silk thread, paper padding on linen. So I'm guessing that it has a bit of an applique quality to it, in that there are paper patterns paper pieces that have been stitched over. For example, I'm guessing the house, the hillside, possibly that's it. Because you can see, we'll talk about technique in a second, but you can see the stitching on the willow trees, on the roses, right? They're more of a sort of Berlin sampler effect going on in the background with traditional sampler motifs. Um, and I don't see any opportunities for paper padding other than the house and the hillside. And they have probably been sort of stitched down with the long stitches, like long stitch, bargello, some of the stitching techniques for needle workers that are a longer stitch as opposed to like a short kind of staccato stitch, like a cross stitch, for example. You're not hiding any pattern under a cross stitch, right? So this is another interesting piece that must have some kind of relief in terms of depth or height. Thank you, Patty. It should be a lot of fun. Catherine, great to see you. Good morning. So this was made in Pennsylvania in 1841. Can you believe it? This was a gift to the Folk Art Museum. I did get some questions over the weekend. What kind of things does the Folk Art Museum accept as a gift? Obviously, I don't know the answer to that. I cannot specifically say one thing or the other thing. But for example, one person said, I have an early 19th century overshot coverlet. That I would think they would be, if it's in if it's in good or very good condition, I would think they would be interested in something like that. It's curious the kinds of things that museums want or need, and it becomes a question of what are they short on, and only they know that, right? We would never know that looking in. It might be like I feel that they're short on rugs, right? I would feel like that, wouldn't I? I feel like they've got some good Hutchinsons, they've got a few old ones, they've got some very random 20th century ones, but I feel like they're quite short on hooked rugs. I feel like they're great on bed covers, bed rugs, not necessarily overshot and loomed stuff, but like the heavy bed rugs that we've talked about many times on this show that do have a pile that look like they're hooked, but they're actually done with a needle. They're very heavy on that, in my opinion. But I don't know their whole collection. I can go through the archive and see, I have gone through to look at all of the textiles they currently have, and I keep track of their new acquisitions because I'm just curious about what's there. I know what's on display, but it's, it really depends on for them what they know what they have coming up in terms of like future exhibits. And if, for example, this is not a thing, this is me making something up. For example, they know they were going to have an exhibit of G's Bend, right, which they have had, or something even different, like a new quilting artist like Joe Cunningham, something like that. And if that were the case, they might try to acquire other articles that would work in that same exhibit. So we don't know that part. The one common sense thing I would say about donating to a very visible museum like that is that they are probably inundated and they're looking for the best examples in every sort of fiber art genre, folk. Um, However, you have local historical societies, um, house museums, right? Maybe that are in Connecticut. We have the Connecticut Preservation Society, and we also have houses that are linked to Historic New England. So those are two really visible ones just in my state. Those are smaller organizations, and they are always looking for stuff. They are always looking for stuff. So it's always worth, if you have things that you're not sure what to do with, and you're thinking, I honestly can't be bothered to try to sell this, but I know that it has historical importance, and maybe only another fiber person would really appreciate how good this is. People on eBay, not so much. Be thinking about not just big museums like the Folk Art Museum, but smaller local museums, because wouldn't it be like just precious to go to an event at your local historical society and see your stuff hanging up there that you gave them that other people can enjoy and learn from? Amazing, right? So definitely something to think about. Back to this piece. Now let's look at this was a gift. Samplers as gifts, and I do plan in 2025 on doing a big thing on samplers, right? Because there is a lot of crossover in terms of design between motifs that work well for a sampler and motifs that might work well for rug hooking. Now, the thing about a sampler, right, the very nature of a sampler is that it crosses over a little bit into text, right? The definition of a sampler would be that a person is practicing both stitching pictorial motifs and letters, numbers, alphabet, whatever. So I think the definition of a sampler is, I'm not sure if this is official or not, but that it would have both, right? Like a fractor. Having said that, historically the layout or the composition of a sampler is very open, right? It has a lot of open space because it's almost like a fabric chalkboard where you're practicing, you're dropping in a bunch of different stuff and you're practicing it all. And that's your notebook or your sketchbook or whatever. So we're not looking with samplers, we are not looking for compositions that are tight in terms of negative space and being cohesive as a design. That's not what samplers do. That's not why they exist. So, for example, this is a classic sampler, right? It's got a lot of open space. It has a border, right? Sometimes with samplers, we see a border that has 3 different borders or 4 different borders, or even each side is broken up into experimenting with different borders. This one is broken into essentially 2 borders. The sides, right, which kind of match, and they do have, for this early date, they do have like an Art Nouveau feel. It's way too early. It's decades too early for that. So it's just a coincidence. It is almost like a Victorian sort of interlocking vine repeat design that is about to hit the end of the 18th century, right? This person created something that is quite ahead of its time in the way that it looks. It has a much more graphic look than other stitching that we see from the Victorian period. Much more graphic. So it's unusual. The border on the side is different than the top border, which is even yet more graphic. Again, another weird kind of harbinger of things to come, like little flowers that look like atomic era MCM modern, those little sort of atomic starburst things that Alexander Calder would do more than 100 years from this date. So interesting. The border on this piece makes me think that this person was looking at some kind of a periodical that included directions for these designs. So we know that in the late 19th century, early 20th century, periodicals like DMC published some really high-end black and white little workbooks with, and that's much later, with cross-stitch driven designs, meaning they were cross-stitch designs. You could use them exactly like that, count the squares and just do it. Or you could translate the cross-stitch lines to more fluid needlework, right? Needle point or embroidery or something with a needle. Judy says samplers are like stitch dictionaries. That's the perfect way, Judy, that's the perfect way to say that. That is so clear. Karen says the animals are all the same size. Interesting that the duck is the same size as the deer. Yep, it is interesting. Proportion is one of the interesting things about samplers. And the thing about it, and the reason that samplers fit so well into the category of folk arts is because the idea was not for realism to occur. The idea was to practice everything on a scale that you could practice it properly and become better at it. So practicing, for example, pots of flowers at the top, or 2 little birds, right? Bunch of little birds, bunch of little flowers, matching flower motifs, right? Just floating in the air. Classic sampler motifs. Classic. And in pairs, right? For many samplers, more the German style of sampler that is called like Berlin work, you get like just everything in the kitchen sink. You just get a backing, typically needle point, not needlework, meaning embroidery, needle point, meaning wool, right? Much thicker wool. But when we see those, we do an episode on this too in the future. When we see these German or these Berlin work pieces, it's basically like looking at a framed image with 50 or 70 or more separate motifs, all the same size. A horse would be the same size as like a buttercup. All the same size, just put down almost like a scrapbook, all on one piece. And they are exciting to look at. They are like a laundry list of motifs, looking at one to the next. Samplers are a little bit different. And samplers, I can't give you a number, but I would say in terms of what I've seen, they're about 50-50 symmetrical versus not. Now, this one is symmetrical, so that's what was chosen. I suppose it also depends on whether this was a school sampler, whether this was a for fun sampler, whether it's a sampler that is meant to be a gift or celebrate a home being built or a child being born or a person dying. It could be any of those things, right? And the nature of the motifs, the style of the sampler, and the intention of the sampler would all affect the way that the piece was laid out. These are also amateur efforts, right? Typically. Now, if you were to pick up your needle and do this sampler, it could be that this girl was learning. I would expect educational samplers to be more varied and to be less symmetrical, because is there a lot of benefit in doing two weeping willow trees as opposed to one? Would one get twice as much sort of education from doing two? I don't know. And I would have to study samplers a lot more, which I plan to know the answers to these very small questions, but still interesting. This is symmetrical. And part of the whimsy of looking at a piece like this, and this would be on linen or homespun, but in this case, I think it's on linen. Yep, it's on linen. This has a lot of outlining, which doesn't always occur. And that's one of the things that makes me think of cross stitch again, because at this time, like anything cross stitch or counted in general is likely to have an outline. Lots of curious decisions here. Karen says the animals. Yep. You know, to me, it's like it's a house. My first guess would be it's the person's house. It's Lavinia's house, family house or whatever. Maybe this is something decorative she works on as a young woman and hopes to take with her to her future house. Maybe this is her house with her husband, although I don't see like children in the yard. Not that that's a given, but you know, that would be a motif that we would see often as well. It is a bit of an inventory, and it's a very cute piece. The stitching at the bottom that looks zigzag, that looks like Bargello, is not. It is just an early long stitch that is done. We see this a lot in the Elizabethan period too, this zigzag, very, very decorative. A chance to really stylize the hillside by making it have this highly patterned fill. I mean, if you look at the hillside and you look at the way the flowers are done, it's completely different styles. So Lavinia is employing different techniques on this one piece. Now, if I knew, or if the Folk Art Museum had gotten this far, we would know whether she did this while at a school, and then we would know what school she did it at. And there are lots of books of samplers that are linked to a specific school or a specific teacher in a specific region. For example, in Wethersfield, Connecticut, we know there were two teachers who taught samplers needlework as an art to young ladies and to very young ladies. And you can really trace the influence of the designs and the choice of motifs to these two teachers. And with enough studying, people who are more sort of scholars on this exact subject would be able to say, no, that's not this teacher, that's this teacher, because that's her willow tree. Or that teacher always did hillsides with this zigzag stitch, right? So how interesting in this is this, because as Judy said, these are stitch dictionaries. It's also like a Rosetta Stone. The more you get involved in samplers, the more things you see in common and also not in common. And the more sort of correlations and assumptions you can make, particularly if they're regional, as far as like why the choices were made, who the teacher might be, whether it is a girl from a boarding school, a girls' school, right? They had girls' schools where they would do art stuff, not boy stuff, not academics. Art stuff, arts, crafts, domestic stuff. Actually, this is a very anti-sentiment, feminist sentiment, but that sounds great to me. I would have loved to have found at this age, like, you know, she was probably 12 or something. Let me find out how old she was. Let's see. And then maybe it'll give us a clue as to, let me come back to you for a second, as to what time in her life she did this. So she did this in 1841, and she was born in 1826. 36 or 7th, 8th, 9th, 40, 41. She was 15 when she did this. So can make the assumption that she might have been in school when she did this. Or maybe she was finished with school, because that is a little bit aged at this time, and maybe she was just making this for her dowry chest or something like that. In any case, it's a beautiful piece. It's an interesting piece. It's very well executed. There might be a little bit of water damage behind the weeping willow on the right, but in general, it is absolutely stunning. The fact of the main motif, the house, the hillside, and the animals, being essentially 2/3 of the way down the composition, means that this is not the kind of composition that would work well for us as rug hookers. You can make something that looks like a sampler, and it's going to look like a sampler. But that's funny, Karen, I didn't see you ask that, but we answered that at the same time. But for us as rug hookers, we are more pattern driven. With our medium, rug hooking or punching, we are talking about more substantial textile. We are talking about something that is just all around has more weight. With something like this, you can get away with, I think in samplers, historic samplers, lots of little filigree scrolls and flowers and leaves fluttering down through a very random sky onto a motif that is only occupying a very small percentage of the whole composition, and that is what is expected. But if you were to do this design as a rug hooker, I would suspect that you would lop it off above the willow trees and do the house with the willow trees. Hey, April. And would you be tempted to, right? Just picture this, lop it off above the willow trees. Would you be tempted to extend the hillside to be much bigger and thus make those animals much bigger? Maybe not 3 times bigger, but maybe 50% bigger, so that you could see them a little bit better. Maybe if your hill was bigger, you could do that. But in any case, regardless, it is absolutely a gorgeous piece. It is very fine, and it doesn't have hardly any damage. It's an extraordinary piece for 1841. And not only that, but these are silk ribbons that have been colored. I'm not seeing a lot of loss, possibly on the hillside, some loss. It's hard for me to tell because my image is small, but I'm not seeing ongoing loss. And wouldn't you expect to, right? Some of the silk to just dematerialize, literally. Hey Heidi, good to see you. I know the time difference is confusing now. Everybody does the time change at different weeks, right? Making it throughout the world very confusing. I'm going to skip over cookie cutter because we did that on Friday. And I'm going to skip over sampler quilt because we did that on Friday. Let's come to Ruthie Rogers. I love this piece. So just to let you know, 3 of the designs that I'm showing you right here today are on ribbon candy hooking. So this is one of the 3. These are out of copyright. I have adapted 3. And when I say adapted, I didn't just trace them and put them up. When you adapt something and you want it to look, you want to make it possible for the rug hooking maker to hook it in such a way that it really resembles the original piece, but you want to also simplify it enough that it is possible to make it look good, right? Ensuring the success of the hooker, because this is a different medium, and a hook is a hell of a lot bigger than the tip of a needle. So with 3 of these pieces that we're looking at today, Ruthie Rogers is one. These are available at Ribbon Candy Hooking. I've already laid them out as line drawings, and they are ready to go. I absolutely love this piece. Let me get you, okay, the Ruthie Rogers sampler. This was made in 1789. Ruthie Rogers lived between 1778 and 1812. Wow, that's not that long of a life. So if she was born in 78, 88, so she made this when she was 11. Did you catch that? She made this when she was 11. She was from Marblehead, Massachusetts. That is one of my favorite places in the world. This is all silk on linen. The dimensions are 9 by 10.5. That is very small. Oh, correction, with the frame, right? We're just talking about the interior. With the frame, it's almost 18 by 16. But that inner part, that's the part that I did for ribbon candy. I did not do the larger border. I just did the inner part. The larger border, like the one before it, is a 3-sided border, right? Not a 4-sided border. The fourth side is the bottom where it says Ruthie Rogers. The three sides is this repeat kind of acorn motif that is very, very filigree. It is needle stitching. It is cross stitching. This is all needle, right? So she did this in 1789. This was a gift to the museum. It is in the public domain because of the year. I think it's an extraordinary piece. Now, when I look at it, I'm looking at it is beautiful, Judy, isn't it? It's just beautiful. We seem to have a red-winged blackbird um, on the tree and above the tree flying, and I see these guys every day. And then there's a bird on the far right. Do you see that has two stripes down its back? I'm not sure what that is, if it's meant to be a blackbird again, because he does have black legs. Maybe she's trying to put kind of a highlight on him or something. Um, are you noticing, for example, the butterfly that is enormous right to the northwest of her head? On top of her head, she seems to have flowers in her hair, and she seems to have a flower pinned to the front of her dress, which would be something that people would do. They had little posies and nosegays and things like that pinned to them, like for perfume purposes, because you can see she's not holding a bouquet, but there is a flower over her chest. She's got a beautiful ribbon, according to the fashion, tied over to the side of her, not right in front of her like the earlier style, but off to the side. Really lovely. She's standing on a couple of flowers that look like a four-leaf clover and a figure eight, right? These are highly stylized flowers. She's doing two styles of flowers here. The ground flower, she seems to be struggling a little bit with shape. So she does the figure eight. She tries the three-sided flower. She does the ones that are in the character's hair that are more like sprigs than or buds than fully realized flowers. She seems to be better at very stylized shapes, like the circular flower, um, which is great. She's got the sort of rose bush or carnation, but I'm thinking rose growing out of the ground on a bush, and it's absolutely beautiful. And then that worked out great. So she's got the potted version of the same thing right above it. So we've got like a live bush growing out of the ground, and then we've got the potted version of a similar flower just above it, and she gets to show her ankles. Yep, she's definitely got stockings on that would have been the kind of stockings that don't come to your waist. They just had stockings that you pulled up your legs, like long socks at this point. But she would have had stockings, and they would not have obviously been synthetic. They would have been cotton or linen or something that kept falling down and driving the person crazy. This is an era where people are not wearing underpants too, which is just an interesting side note. She could have been wearing something like bloomers or drawers underneath, but more like boxer shorts. So yeah, fairly uncomfortable days for women. And at this point, being a girl at this age, she would still be wearing whatever bodice was in style or shaping device that was in style that were typically very dangerous, right? Really pronounced. However, in Marblehead is a really wealthy area, and it was in the 18th century as well. In Marblehead, heading into these years, there's lots of boycotts on luxury items because of the time in history. This is coming out. What did I say the exact year for this is? Let me check. Shoot, wait a minute. I put that paper away. This is 1898, so post-revolution. So we would have been doing a lot of producing already in this country too. There's funny. I don't want to go on a tangent with costume, but one of the funny things that women had at this time was a really tight corset type thing. It's not necessarily like a Victorian corset. It's not that tight yet, but they can have this kind of bodice thing, or they called it body, that wrapped around your body. And it would typically put your boobs like over the top of it. It wouldn't cover them, or it would cover half of them, so that you had this great décolleté on top. And they had this thing that was like a stick. I forget what the name of it is. It looked like a popsicle stick that you put down between your boobs, right? And a lot of assumptions are being made because if there's not much, then there's nothing to separate. Separator. That's what it was. It was a separator. But you do find these items. They look like popsicle sticks. They were dull because obviously it would hurt if it poked you and you sat down, it poked you in the stomach or poked you in the boobs or whatever. But they are beautiful because you see them inlaid with pearl and shells and more precious stones. They are extraordinary to find. And sometimes when you see them, like at an antique store or something, if it looks like a popsicle, but it looks like a luxury item, something that a woman would want that's super, super beautiful, I bet it's a separator. Separator. We'll leave it at that. So yeah, she's gorgeous and she's in a gorgeous costume. And this young lady has really filled this space, right? Carol says, I love the shape of the tree trunk. The whole tree splits right in half. It's absolutely gorgeous. Maybe she was working faster than the other girls or whatever, because she has obviously felt the need to put a lot into this one piece, right? There's not a lot of quiet areas like the one we looked at before. It is busy. There's even a little yellow bird on the top right-hand side. Now, she's staying away from flowers in the tree too. She's doing kind of the apple tree look or a berry tree or some kind of a blossom tree. But she seems more comfortable with leaves and buds than she is with flowers. She likes things that are round, but she doesn't seem to like things that are shaped weird. The butterfly has round wings too. So who knows what that's about? But it is an extraordinary piece for me, mostly because behind the tree, I don't know if her colors changed over the years, but it almost looks like a cubist breakdown of a sky behind the tree, right? Even the tree trunk, you see how the part that's closer is lighter and the part that's a little darker is behind. Um, Barbara says lots of info online about Ruthie. Are you serious? Ooh, ooh, I'm excited. I have so many books on samplers. I bought, it was a huge investment, but I bought this series of magazines on samplers there's like 50 of them that I've managed to find over the last few years. And there's actually photographs pasted on the pages. They were not printed. They were made by an antique store. I know I've said the name before. I'm never going to think of it. It was a mother and daughter store. But they dealt in antique embroideries and needlework. And they had a lot of samplers. So they put these books together of samplers. And each one features maybe 10 or 15 samplers that had passed through their hands over the decades that they were a business. And I don't think they are anymore. But I bought all of the ones that I could find, and I think I might have all of them at this point. So that's what I really want to scour through and go over with you so we can get the best out of those examples of textile art. And there is a lot of crossover to us here because this would make an amazing hooked rug. Now, would you want to hook the background of the sky and behind the flowers, right? You see how the leaves behind the flowers are like the spearmint color, a little bit different than the dark green. And you see how the dark green on the right hand side is darker than the green on the left hand side behind the character. Is that because of fading? Probably not, right? Because it's so symmetrical. Do you think she ran out of a color? Do you think she switched to a color that wasn't as color fast, that looked like the same color? There is a lot of color discrepancy here. There's a lot of color shift, but God, does it create interest. It would be up to you as a hooker to decide if you wanted to keep that wild, fractured sky. To me, I love it. And it adds so much to the piece. But it obviously isn't essential to the success of the piece. It's a beautiful piece all on its own. And Barbara, I cannot wait to dig into Ruthie Rogers' stuff. Yeah, the sky is your favorite, Judy. Oh, it was so cool. It seems like an artistic interpretation. Yeah, that sky, I'm going to stop. But that, because I have to leave on time because Teddy has a half day. That sky reminds me of Marc Chagall. If you think about his pieces, right, because he teetered on cubism and he experimented with cubism, didn't like it, but he experimented. He did a lot with fractured skies. And this really reminds me of one of his pieces. Even in terms of it being very folky and stilted, There's a lot more to say on this. A lot more to say. So this is simply known at the Folk Art Museum in New York as Crewel work picture. It's not very specific. This is one of the designs that's available now at Ribbon Candy Hooking. This was done unknown artist, and so unknown year, but between 1750 and 1760. New England, probably Massachusetts. This is wool on linen, and this probably would have been homespun linen. The dimensions are 9 by 7 and 3/8. So this is not a huge piece. This is an interesting piece for more than a couple of reasons. But we have this great folk feel to it. There's a great folky flow. This is wool, right? So this looks familiar. The fiber that we're seeing, the silk is much, much thinner and finer. With wool, we actually are seeing stitches a lot more easily. Again, we're looking at a breakdown of the ground being almost halfway up the composition, right? So that's a little bit different. This is not a sampler piece. This is a crewel work piece, meaning a variety of stitches. It's a very dark ground, and it has that Jacobean feel to it, in that the ground is literally patterned, stuffed, and filled with motifs. Huge flowers, a tiny horse, way out of proportion, just filled, jammed with motifs, and creating a lot of busyness and a lot of variety. As soon as we hit the surface, we're seeing those little red dots, and honestly, I don't know what they are. On the far left, there's a cut off bird who's got one of them in the beak, so I've got to think it's berries. However, there aren't any on the primary tree. God, is that a swirling Garden of Eden tree or what? And the artist is doing the Jacobean era technique of splitting the leaf in half color-wise. So this is a flowering tree. It gives us a season, spring. And over the top of the tree, there seemed to be this motif that is like a wisp, often is a cloud, but in this case, I think it might be a bird. I think these might be stretched birds because they seem to have faces and some kind of collar, like a color change at the neck or the throat. There's a second motif to the right, which is another kind of flowering tree that has like little black pips, but also these big red flowers. So it is a little confusing, but it looks like the second, if we're assuming these are long, skinny birds, odd, because the one on the far left is a normal fat bird with a wing. I suppose these things could alternately be like, I don't know, ferrets or snakes. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But we are seeing creatures wanting to eat these red things, right? With the exception of the horse, the two long, skinny eel things, the bird and the butterfly up top, are going for those red things off that tree. So interesting. It's an interesting composition. I love the red things, whatever they are, buds or berries, or they don't look like berries, but who knows? It's very hard to tell. The butterfly is unusual too. It looks like a double-winged butterfly with this really long striped body. So it seems like some liberties have been taken in terms of color choices. Why not? I mean, you have to work with what you've got. Absolutely gorgeous. There is a bit of a Garden of Eden feel to me because the proportions are so wrong. These gigantic plants that are like dwarfing, unless this is an example of like the smallest horse in the history. Maybe this horse is now extinct, right? He's the size of a butterfly. It does bring charm and whimsy and it's just a bit of a magical feel to a fairly straightforward composition with a lot of room for play. Another great piece for the rug hooker, and this is called Crewel Work Picture. I'm going to speed up a little bit because here we're looking at a piece that is known as Saddlebred Horse Quilt, artist unidentified. This was made between 1910 and 1930. Look at the feed sack fabrics here. And think back to our conversation on Friday night. We talked a lot about feed sacks, the manufacture, the reason they existed, the color palette, and the many uses of feed sacks from crafts to clothing. So 1910 to 1930, this was probably made in Kentucky. This is all cotton. It is 77 3/4 by 81 3/4 inches. It's a large piece, and guess what? guess what the inspiration here is for the main motif. Now on the top and bottom, think back to our conversation on Friday, because there are different quilt blocks on the top and bottom. This functions in part as a sampler quilt because yes, the top has all the same blocks, but look at the bottom, right? It's a different set of blocks on the bottom, and some of them are not the same. So it does function as a sampler quilt. That is interesting. And then we've got little sort of postage stamp bars on the top and bottom, but there is that giant center where there is only one enormous motif. And it seems to me that the design for the motif was taken from a cross-stitch pattern for obvious reasons, right? Cross-stitch patterns are illustrated by showing blocked off boxes, almost like an SAT test, right? You just fill in the box and you know that's where you put an X in. It seems to me, and I cannot prove this, of course, but that the motif for this, just because of the shape of it and the pixelated quality of it, it seems to me like this was done looking at a crosswork pattern, doesn't it? What an unusual decision, because I'm thinking that the whole middle of the quilt, with the exception of the top and bottom border that are joined quilt blocks in a row, right? A row of quilt blocks, a row of postage stamp blocks, 1x1s, 2x2s, whatever. And then we go down to the body of it, and I think they are still piecing in the bottom of it. I think this is the whole center, with the exception of the top and the bottom. It is all pieced squares and about the same size. And it doesn't say, there's no information, but I would expect to find that this is all hand done with tiny pieces that have been pieced together. And if this person was committed to, or sort of destined to do a composition, a compositional quilt that was based entirely on little squares, it was probably because of the materials that she had to work with, not because she wanted to do a lot of extra sewing, right? And she probably thought it was a great brainstorm, and it was, to refer to a cross-stitch pattern for this design. The design changes color partway through as well. So it could be that she was looking at a design, for example, for weaving as opposed to cross-stitch. I don't know. But she did go through with the color change from black to brown. Pixel quilts. Judy, you're right. Pixel quilts are popular today. She was way ahead of her time between 1910 and 1930. Isn't this a curious piece? Because I wouldn't say that it's great to look at. It's a very clunky, heavy piece in the middle of a very pastel, big open space. I wouldn't say it's overly pleasing, but I would say its charm is in the curiosity of it, wondering and thinking, what was the reference for this maker? Barbara says, wonder why the bottom half or legs are different. I know it, right? And why they weren't kind of integrated. It is curious. There is a color change in the middle of the horse too. It's a very odd piece, and I do wish that as pieces were, and I'm sure that the folk art does, add as much and research as much as they can when the piece is received into the collection. Catherine, precursor to Lego. It does look like that, doesn't it? It does make you wonder what you could do with Lego, right? You could do this easily. But I'm sure that when the time arises, when there is a reason to do more research on some of these pieces, they will. But obviously, they don't have the manpower. No one does to do exhaustive research on every piece every time. I might leave it there for today, even though we are nowhere near finished. Just because, as I say, Teddy has a half day today, so I've got to get over there. So you saw 2 of the 3 pieces that are in the Ribbon Candy Hooking Store. They are there as patterns, and I'm happy to put them onto backing for you. I don't have a lot of orders right now. I would love to get some orders, to be perfectly honest. It's not a great order time of year right now. If those are interesting, they are there for you, and I've already drawn them out, so they're ready to go. There's one more that you haven't seen yet that we will look at. I'm just looking at my calendar quickly. Because tomorrow I am busy. On Wednesday, I'm back in Newport doing more Tigger stuff. So you know what might be fun? Why don't we come back on Thursday afternoon? I'm going to put this on the calendar. We haven't done this lately. Why don't we come back Thursday at 4 p.m. to finish this conversation, because we have probably 5 or 6 more to look at. That'll take us an hour. So why don't we come back for an afternoon edition of Cocktail Time on Thursday at 4 o'clock on November 21st to finish this conversation so that on Friday we can look at the new issue of Atha as our complete episode. I want to conclude this before we get too far away in our mind from what we were talking about in the first place. So why don't we do this on Thursday? I just put it in my calendar, Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll come back and look at the rest of these. In the meantime, check out Ribbon Candy Hooking for classes. That photography class will be switched to next Wednesday. Rebecca's classes are up. These products are up. There's a few more things that are coming up like a flower, and a bunch of things I haven't thought to remind you of. Life being the way that it is right now, but so many things on the horizon, so many things for us to share. Magpie, Judy is putting the last flourishes on that, and then you will see that for sale. I will have that for you very, very soon. Maybe even this afternoon. It depends on how far she gets. So we're just double checking and proofing everything at this point. And otherwise, you can reach me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. And I think the center of the horse is a patterned fabric. I think so too, Judy. It looked like it was calico or something like that. Let's pick up that image on Thursday when we come back into the conversation. I want to stretch it much larger on the screen to see what else we can see. Oh, Diane said the center of the horse looks deteriorated. It could be that the material in the center is either patterned, Diane, you're a huge quilter, or broken down, right? But it's not silk, it's cotton, which doesn't mean it wouldn't be broken down. It's just more likely to be broken down if it's silk because it's so brittle. I'll stretch that. Remind me to stretch that out, the saddlebred horse, as our first image on Thursday at 4. I hope you can join me then. I know it's a weird time. Judy, Minecraft. Yes, absolutely. I got to tell the kids that. They'll think that's really funny. All right. Hey, I will see you all soon. I will see you on Thursday. Have a great Tuesday and Wednesday. And